Okay, so variation is often caused by contact between languages. This is the fifth part of sociolinguistic study, contact between languages. So, being that no language lives in a vacuum, let's say, for instance, you're an English speaker in Canada, and I'm an English speaker here. Well, you're going to have a lot more contact with the French language than I am. So French is undoubtedly going to infuse itself a lot more into your language than it is into mine. But it is going to have an influence because they do have contact. And probably French speakers in Canada have a lot more English influence in their language than French speakers in France. See what I mean? Because of the contact. But what happens when two languages come into contact? One has more status than the other. We have that prescriptive or emotional judgment about one language being better than another, so it's got status. So you have the language of status, and then you have the other language. So which one is going to influence the other one more, right? Yeah, this one's going to take the hit, and this one's going to kind of, maybe some. Well, but when you're talking about standard American English and American Sign Language, guess what happens? You got nothing but this, and you got none of that. ASL does not influence spoken English at all. You won't hear my mom saying pa, pa. She's not going to do it. So the only way that it does have any overlap or influence is with bilingual people like interpreters or codas. So what happens is there's a lot of English-like signing that goes on, even with deaf people and even with native users of American Sign Language. So again, where do you draw the line between what ASL is and where ASL ends and English begins? It's really hard to tell. And this influence that one language has over another, the textbook talks about lexical borrowing. Well, we talked about lexical borrowing before, didn't we? How we say entrepreneur and things like that. But it can also happen at any of those structural levels of language. We might take on a click in English. You never know, in the phonology of English, whatever, you never know. So all of those things can change. I really like also how Ralph Fasold, who is an excellent sociolinguist, talks about how people can metaphorically switch or code switch. Here's the thing. Remember when we talked about slang? Kids can understand parents, but parents can't understand kids. Parents can't automatically code switch to talk like their kids because it sounds weird. They'll make commercials out of that to make jokes, or comedians will do it to make jokes. But kids automatically code switch when they talk to their grandparents or their teachers or whoever, right? So kids are code switchers. Who knew? We know that happens in American Sign Language as well, that somebody will all of a sudden start using more English-like vernacular. And what Ralph Fasold says is that a lot of that has to do with metaphorical reasons, or metaphorical switching it's called. Because if you're talking about culture, for instance, you're going to use your own native language naturally. But if you're talking maybe about education, you might switch more to the more standard language of the majority, the language that has the status. So that's interesting. Now, the thing is, one of the weird things that the authors do is they talk about interference during this contact lesson, when really I really wanted them to have a whole separate lesson on language acquisition, like I mentioned earlier. Because when we're talking about interference, what we're really talking about is two languages in one person's head. I have one native language, and later I choose to learn another one. Well, the thing that's already in my head is going to have all this influence over the new one, and I'm going to have all this problem with the noise in my brain about my own native language. So, for example, if I'm learning Spanish, I'm going to have a hard time learning their phonology and how to roll the R's. I'm going to have a hard time understanding that nouns have gender. A desk is male, but a table is female, or a drawer is male. El cajon, a drawer. La mesa, the table. Why is one male, one female? Because we don't have that in English, but their morphology does have it. I may be learning Aleutian, and I have to learn 12 different words for snow. Spanish again. What is your phone number? Syntactically, I can't say what que is es your tu phone teléfono number número. I can't say that. That's not a sentence. Que es tu teléfono número. It's not a sentence. I have to say cuál es el número de teléfono. It's a whole different syntactic structure. And obviously, back channel signals are going to be different from language to language. Spanish speakers don't go, uh-huh, uh-huh. They go, ay, or sí, right? Completely different. You want to, when you're talking to, or when you're learning Spanish, you want to say things like, uh-huh, uh-huh. Or you want to say, what is your phone number in that order? Your native language is interfering with your ability to figure out the new language. So let's say you now start studying a third language. Now what happens is you're groping for that word in the third language, and all you can come up with is the one in the second language. You're past your own, but you can't get to the third. It's very interesting. And that wraps up our discussion on sociolinguistics. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about all those 5 things that our authors say sociolinguists study. And I want you to think about all those factors and how they influence you or impact you as a learner of a second language. Whether it's American Sign Language or Spanish or Chinese, I don't care. How does that affect you? But specifically, how does it affect your learning of American Sign Language? That is the most important thing I want you to think about. And again, if you have any questions, discussion board is great. It's been a great semester. I know as much as I've whined about doing these video lectures, it has truly been a pleasure. And it's been a pleasure working with all of you, and I really look forward to getting our final projects in and seeing how we can apply all of the stuff we've just talked about. All right, take care.